Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz.
Very good evening to you and welcome to Newsline Zoom. This evening our guest knows a thing or two about the subject matter at hand, and which is of course the forthcoming start of the Maha season, and obviously there's apparently no fertilizer. We'll find out from somebody who knows a thing or two, as I said, and he is of course Professor Saman Dharmakeerthi from the University of Peradeniya, and very specifically from the Faculty of Agriculture. Very good evening to you, Professor.
Very good evening, Faraz, and I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you loud and clear. Zoom's working. And straight away, let me ask you, the Maha season is supposed to start around the 15th of October. We're a few days away from there. And from some of the information that I've received, farmers are complaining that they don't have fertilizer anyway. And so we are wondering, I'm wondering, what is the harvest likely to be in some months' time?
Okay, I think it is a big dilemma at the moment in farmers' minds, as well as from scientists' mind, as well as policymakers' mind. I think in the country it seems that there's apparent fertilizer or plant nutrient shortage at the moment. And maybe it apparent to be that it is directly related to the policy decision that the government took in some time back in late April, and to stop chemical fertilizer importation to the country, which led the government to find alternatives for organic fertilizers. And at the very beginning, they promised that the organic fertilizers will be produced and will be given in the Maha season. And it was at that time the Yala season. And so the farmers were very optimistic about having a good farm practice using organic fertilizers in the Maha season. And it seems that as from the news that is emerging, even the organic fertilizers are not going to come to Sri Lanka at required times, it seems. So as we have observed that, we have noticed that there are certain microorganisms present in the fertilizer lot that the government has offered the tender, but and they are trying to do some other ways. In any case, the farmers have not got enough fertilizers at their hand at the moment, and which is to say that, as you very correctly Varas mentioned, that we are going to open the Maha season in 2 weeks' time, and at the land preparation times there should be some fertilizer going on. And worst come scenario is after 2 weeks for paddy cultivation, after land preparation and planting, there should be nitrogen fertilizer going in. And at the moment, as the government also
uncultivated, how long should it stand?
That depends on the conditions of the soil and how much input has been gone into that field that is there. And generally speaking, people talk about say 5 to 10 years time period, depending on the inputs already available in the soil, so organic inputs. So definitely more than 3-4 years time to get the organic certificate. But if you want to put organic inputs and without claiming for organic produce, that is possible at any time. So you can just switch the nutrients that is going into the plant from chemical to organic, but the farmers will not be able to claim they are organically produced in that sense. So in order to claim that they are organically produced and organically certified, there should be some grace period, as I mentioned, somewhere from 3 to 10 years, depending on the soil type.
So in the interim period, in that first 3 years, for example, are you saying that any harvest from that, let's call it, from the potatoes or whatever, the vegetable, let's say, are you suggesting then that that harvest will not be entirely organic in nature, that it is actually a hybrid?
It is a hybrid, of course, because the plant does take up certain chemicals from the soil. If the chemicals already present in the soil, then the plants will carry some of these chemicals as well. And that is one thing. And the other thing is that the chemicals will take some time to sort of get away from the soil, to get destroyed by the nature, and for which we need some time. So during that period of time, then nobody can claim that it is organically produced. And that is one. And the other hand, in this conversion period, there will be some yield losses as well that farmers will have to face, depending on the material or the plant nutrients that you are putting in.
Professor Saman, what is going to happen? Because obviously, as it is, we've been used to importing various food items and so on and so forth to supplement our food requirements. And when farmers are unable to get their requisite fertilizer, what are the chances of the farmers actually abandoning their farms, their land, and looking for employment elsewhere? What happens then? What happens to our food security then?
It is a big question as well. Yeah, that's what we predicted at the very beginning of this movement. And we categorically said that if the farmers does not get the agricultural inputs in time and in quantity, and if they can't produce them in the yields that they were expected, and their income is going to be reduced, and the farmers will sort of abandon their cultivation and look for any other alternative employments. So there are so many things happening along with that. So one thing is, as you mentioned, the food security, the extent of land that has been cultivated to produce a certain amount of food, at least in certain crops. And then the other thing is, it is a more dangerous thing. I think it is abandoning of agricultural lands will eventually lead to be taken up by some other projects, some other development projects. And if the farmers are not cultivating, and then those lands will be, anybody can use it using gazette notifications or something, and for other purposes. And that is the most danger in the long run to secure food security, to have a food security in the country. So farmers' income will be reduced and they will be migrating from agriculture. Food security will be at stake, and the lands will be opened up for some other projects that is not the interest of the country, in terms of food security and sovereignty.
Would you venture to say that this decision that has been embarked upon is actually ill-advised and at best reckless because it plays around with the food security of our Sri Lanka?
I think it is a reckless decision, because at the government's policy document, that's the Vistas of Prosperity, they categorically pointed out that this conversion is going to be 10 years, and which can be could be viewed as feasible. And then overnight, Yala, you took the decision to convert everything into the Maha. And other than the food security and the amount of crop that we harvest from the land, and economists were sort of pointing out that our foreign exchange income in terms of dollars is going to be reduced further. For example, one of the main income sources is foreign exchange earnings is tea sector. And people were predicting somewhere around less than 50% of yield in tea plantations, and therefore which will reduce the tea exports by 50%, which is going to be a huge loss to the economy in that terms. So that is just one crop, and there are so many other crops. And we will probably need to import food items from other countries, for which also we need some dollars. And we are in a crisis of foreign exchange, and therefore there are so many other aspects related to this reckless decision, I would say, at this stage.
On the back of the tea industry's significant contribution to our economy here in Sri Lanka, would you say that by banning the use of some of these chemical fertilizers, that the government of this day are gambling, for want of a different word, are gambling with our food security, because they know only too well, surely, that the tea industry brings in, they sell 300 million kilos of tea around the world in any given year. And the money that is generated in foreign exchange is not to be sniffed at. Not when the tourism industry is not underperforming because we don't have the people, and we are missing the $4 billion a year from that. So that's why I'm asking you whether this is actually, what is it? Is it, in your view, is it not going back on what I said scenario, or is it that we don't have the money to pay for the fertilizer, which I understand to be around $400 million every year?
I think at the very beginning, I think I missed one part of your previous question that is related to whether the government is ill-advised or not. I think the government is ill-advised, and they probably have not discussed the pros and cons in detail, and therefore the decision that they took, and we pointed out repeatedly at several forums that this is going to happen, is now happening, which is to say that the government has been ill-advised by some people. And then you ask about the foreign exchange, and which is about $400 million for fertilizer imports.
Yeah.
And for us now, if you do some maths, and we are earning about $2 billion from tea sector. And if we cut down fertilizers, and if we predict about a 50% loss, and we are going to lose about $1 billion in place of $400 million to save from fertilizers. So the problem is huge. I mean, it is a very short-sighted decision to take at this particular moment. And when the tourism industry is not taking place because of this COVID, and I think we could have done much better in this situation rather than resorting to a solution like this or a policy decision like this. So I think this is the correct time to relook at our decision and put the country into a correct path. I think that we need to start doing right now, and our policymakers has to look at this very seriously. And if I add, if you lose tea plantations, for example, because of this, to recover that tea plantations, it takes longer time, which is costly. And at the same time, there are so many other people in the world who wants to grab this tea industry from our hands. We have Ceylon tea, and everybody wants to take that Ceylon tea brand out from the market so that they can claim the big proportion. And we are sort of paving way for that as well. So this is going to be a disastrous situation in the country.
Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukat.
And welcome back to Newsline Zoom. I'm in conversation this evening with Professor Saman Dharmakeerthi, who is from that wonderful university up in the hills, the University of Peradeniya, the Faculty of Agriculture, and we are talking fertilizer. We're talking about organic fertilizer, the lack of it even. Let's continue our discussion. Professor Saman, tell me please, you said this is reckless, you said it's very dangerous. Do you believe that the government and the officials who are actually behind all this are reading it that way? Or are they a spineless bunch of people who don't want to stand up and tell the president and his men and women that, you know, what he's doing is wrong, and that the real truth is we can do it, but we need several years and not overnight?
I think once a decision has been taken by the head of the country, and it is the duty of the government officers to execute that decision. So what the government officials are doing is that undertaking or executing those decisions, and I think that is the right way to do it. But at the same time, we should be able to, or even if it is not the government officers, but the others in the society should be able to point out this is not going to work that way, and try to revert the decision and bring the country to some place where we can see benefits to the country. And I think at the moment, the government officers are keeping their silence. It's because of the decision that has been imposed on them from the top, and the Honorable President has several times mentioned that as well. So we took a decision and you execute that, and I think that is what is happening at the moment. And independent scientists, independent people should be able to, and they have sort of raised their voices as well in many forums, in social media as well as in other popular media as well, and pointing out the repercussions or the dangers of it. And then it is the duty of the people who took the decision to consider them again and revert the decision for the betterment of the country. I think that is where I am standing, and I think that, and I believe that the policymakers will take this seriously at this point in time and relook at their decision and put the country into the correct path in terms of agriculture is concerned.
Now, I some months ago, I read a report, and I think they were talking about either Nepal or Bhutan, and after 20 years of attempting to go all organic, they told their legislators that they need more time. This is after 20 years. And on the flip side of that story is that after 20 years, they managed to produce one item that was entirely organic in nature, complete with certification, and that one item was lemongrass. I put it to you, Professor Saman, that having just one product, all organic, is not going to be enough.
That depends. That depends on everything. At the end comes to rupees and cents. So how much you're going to produce and how much extra bucks you are going to produce from getting the organic certificate is an issue. And I think, yeah, you are correct. By putting one crop into organic certification is not enough for the country. But so whether can we do it for all crops? And do we need to do it for all crops is a different question. And I think it's better that, as you mentioned, that Bhutan, I think they planned from 2008 to 2015 to convert the country into 100% organic, and then they sort of executed it. They implemented it. And then after 3 years, they realized that it's not going to work. And they buy time for until 2030. And so, yeah, we make decisions and we understand the gravity of the decision that we do. And there are certain other things that we did not have previously looked into, are reevaluated, and we have to revert our decisions. And in that decision reverse, when we are going to revert the decision, then we need to look very carefully about what are the crops that we are going to get. Is it lemongrass only, or is it some good proportion of key importable vegetables? So we need to sort of work out in a step-by-step direction, and rather than putting everything overnight into one organic business.
And Professor Saman, what about the whole business of the paddy cultivation then?
Do we need organic paddy to our country? I'm not very sure about that requirement, whether it is a need. What we need is some rice to eat, and need to secure food, to keep the food security. And for paddy, I think there are niche markets in the world where organic certificated rice will get a better price. And even at the moment, we are not exporting paddy because we need to feed our nation. So we are not going to sort of export paddy to get the price advantage of exporting organic paddy. So in my opinion, it is not a requirement to convert paddy lands into organic, but if the concern is related to environmental aspects related to paddy cultivation and the agricultural inputs used, there are so many other ways to minimize the concerns related to environment from agricultural inputs like chemical inputs. So we can look at it, and agriculture department has suggested the good agricultural practices, and as far as the plant nutrients are concerned, we can go for integrated plant nutrient management. So so when the objective is to produce enough to feed the nation and not to export, and I don't think that we need to get the organic certificate for rice.
And would you say that it's again a dangerous move to start doing that, because it'll impact on the output?
Even within the local market, there are certain people who wants to buy organically grown rice. So there's a market for that. For that market, to cater that market, we can grow some rice for that consumers, that group of consumers. But to convert everything into organic, and when there's no demand for such a movement, I don't think it is a good thing to do that, and it is not required at the moment. And people didn't ask to eat organically grown rice in the country. There's only very few elite class of people who will go behind organic foods. And I would say that it is, if I were to go and buy food, I would buy normal food. And why should I go for very food?
And but Professor Saman, where is the end going to be? Are we going to suffer because the harvest is not going to be enough to feed ourselves? Then we don't have yet any money in terms of dollars, although the governor of the central bank, Kajit Nibat Cabral, has announced his roadmap and so on for short-term recovery. When you add all these up, where are we going to be headed in terms of our availability of the most basic food?
Okay, maybe I lost some of my connectivity.
Yeah.
What I can see is that even if we produce or provide organic fertilizers to the agricultural lands, we are going to see a reduction in food production or productivity in the agricultural land by 25%. So even if we produce, and now that the government does not have the capability of providing the organic fertilizers, they will definitely have to provide some alternative mechanisms to provide plant nutrients so that we will not reduce the yield further, right? And for that, the government has to relook at their decision that they took. And if I think we should not hesitate to revert the decision for the betterment of the country. And yes, in terms of dollars and in terms of food security, I can say that we are not heading towards in a good direction at the moment. Even though there are short-term measures that the government has taken, as stated by Mr. Ajit Niwad Kabra, the governor of the central bank, but that is very short-term. But I can see that the longer term, if this is the policy that we are going to continue, we are going to hit badly on the rock wall.
Professor Saman Dharmakeerthi, thank you for joining us on Newsline Zoom. We're sorry about some of the signals, but as our 10-year-old Danuka said on International Children's Day, the signals can be a bit challenging, and the network operators need to up their ante and address that issue because it has wide repercussions. But Professor Saman Dharmakeerthi, thank you very much, and do come back on our network and tell us the important message. I suppose the next time we talk you can tell me what we can actually do about it.
Sure, I will. So you, in the next discussion, I can talk about, but very briefly, if I want to sort of add something, what we need to do at this point in time, I think the decision to import organic fertilizers was wrong, in my opinion. And we showed the microorganisms that are harmful to the country was about to sort of brought in. So we should not take any risk about organic fertilizers. That is number one. So if we don't have organic fertilizers and if we are not importing, then the other alternatives are to go for other plant nutrients from chemical fertilizers. And now we have a very good organic fertilizer production in place in the country. And with that, if we reduce the chemical fertilizer imports, and if we import the good quality chemical fertilizers to the country, good quality second and third generation chemical fertilizers, put together them with the already produced organic fertilizers in the country, and we can still protect our environment and produce enough food for the nation. And that is the only solution I can see at this moment.
And thank you very much, Professor Saman Dharmakeerthi. And that's the way it was on Newsline Zoom this evening. Take care, have a great week ahead of you, and as always, God bless you.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukatali.